Back in the day, the conventional wisdom was that if we were going to grow our economy, we had to get a lot more energy. We needed more power plants. We needed more oil production. We needed more of everything. So in autumn of 1973, the world was turned upside down by the Arab oil embargo. Inflation, gas lines around the block, vulnerability to supply, paranoia in the governments of the world. And into the mix of this very confusing landscape steps Amory Lovins with a seminal paper in Foreign Affairs in which he puts forward a very different argument about what our energy future could be. Conventional wisdom is that energy use is going to be going up, 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 as it always has. And he says, well, instead of that, we could actually have total use plateau and come down a little bit. Along the way, we can transform the way we provide energy into more renewable, safe, environmentally friendly forms. This was viewed as absolute heresy by many, but started to get through the thinking of some of the people in the establishment, including the President of the United States. And he'd read Amory's papers and his books, and a lot of what they talked about was incorporated in Carter's energy policies. So suddenly this 27-year-old dropout from Harvard and Oxford is a leading thinker on the world stage. He's being asked to give speeches, he's getting all kinds of consulting gigs, and he's trying to figure out what to be when he grows up.
Carter and I started RMI in April '82 to foster the efficient and restorative use of resources. You would be astonished by what people said back then, saying, you can't save energy, it's already optimally used. We're in a market economy. If efficiency is worthwhile, we would have done it already.
It was inconceivable to most people in the utility industry that there was any business model for a utility aside from building as many big central power stations of whatever variety, nuclear, coal, gas, oil, as fast as they can, as many as they can, and electrifying the economy. What if we put together a service targeted at the utilities, the regulators, the utilities' major customers, anybody who cares about utility policy? This seems to be the teachable moment about utilities.
In the early years of Rocky Mountain Institute, they had a lot of interesting assignments, but there was no way that RMI was going to go out and change every light bulb in the country. They were hired by utility companies, government agencies, intervener groups, and what they found was that they were being asked the same questions over and over again, and they were giving largely the same answers over and over again, and they realized, well, if we could package this all up into an information service and provide that information to many organizations at once, and to focus on organizations that have an enormous amount of leverage, namely utility companies. That service was called Competitech. It resided within RMI and it operated there for about 4 years.
We had unusual ways of looking at end-use systems and how to make each several-fold more efficient. So we started writing these massive volumes.
We were basically the Book of the Year club, putting out these voluminous tomes in energy-efficient lighting, motors, drive power, appliances, heating, cooling, etc. But that's what the world needed at that point. No one had ever compiled that information in one place.
Back in the 80s, I worked at Pico Energy. Competitech really helped me understand that threshold of what technologies were emerging, what made sense, what worked, how it helped not only the customer, but the environment and the utility as well.
Competitech was a smashing success. What if we take this business model one step further? What if we create a separate for-profit business and in effect spin it out of RMI?
When we spun the company off and moved it to Boulder, we eventually changed the name to eSource. We brought in James Newcomb. James had been running the natural gas practice at CERA, Cambridge Energy Research Associates.
So I came to join as the president to help lead the launch of what quickly became eSource.
Brad Davids joined us as VP of Marketing and Member Services.
When we got eSource started, we didn't want to be an advocacy group. We wanted to be a source of credible information about a topic that utilities needed to know about.
eSource put it all into context, the technologies and the environment and the regulators and the utilities.
The era in which eSource emerged, it was in many respects the perfect moment for an institution like this for several reasons. This was a period of rapid expansion of energy efficiency, of an emerging national consensus on the importance of energy efficiency as a utility system resource, of a regulatory consensus on the need to realign the business model so that energy efficiency fit and indeed could assume a central position.
And along comes competitive restructuring of the industry, and everybody's blindsided. The notion is that we're going to open up what had been these regulated monopolies to competition. Customers are going to have a choice of providers. The private market is going to provide value-added services like energy efficiency. That's no longer the role of the utility company.
Profound shockwaves in the industry. The electric utilities were frightened by the prospect of the loss of their traditional business models.
So we developed a series of white papers to help them reimagine what their role is, and said, well, actually, if you want to remain relevant, if you want to keep your customers, the only way to distinguish yourselves is to provide value-added services like energy efficiency.
We tried to point out that integrated services, energy services, could be a crucial part of the transition.
And at the same time it was producing those white papers, eSource was convening leadership of the utility sector to work through the implications. And those white papers were not simply tossed out into the world at random. They were the basis for some of the most intense and productive conversations of that era among the leadership of the electricity sector, not just utilities, but other stakeholders.
As eSource grew, we decided to recruit for a chief operating officer. In that recruitment process, along came a candidate who said he wasn't interested in being a COO, but might be a president for us. Wayne jumped into the middle of eSource at a pretty crucial moment when we were kind of at the knee of a growth curve with a lot of opportunity to build on.
Our business was fundamentally changing at that point, along with our utility customer business, and we were trying to stay ahead of that curve by looking at the market and identifying new ways of creating value.
What grew out of this disruption for eSource as well as for our member utilities was a recognition that the customer sits at the center of all of this. It caused us to develop a much richer portfolio of services for our utility clients that helped them in turn understand at a much more granular level all the different customer groups that they were serving. What went from a single product company essentially grew over time to talk more about marketing and communications and customer experience.
The utility industry's really changed a lot from 30 years ago when I was working in it to 20 plus years I've been here at eSource. When I started in energy efficiency, we were kept literally in the basement. And we were only allowed to go upstairs for important meetings, and then we were to scurry back downstairs where we were doing this weird energy efficiency stuff, which was probably costing the utility money. Now, of course, we see utilities turning efficiency into profit centers, adding on for-profit services, trying to figure out how to deal with solar and distributed energy resources and all kinds of things.
DSM programs are so well established and mainstream in almost every place now. It helps us to up our game. We need to help them stay ahead of the curve for what's the new kind of program. How do we engage customers the next way with energy efficiency? And how do we keep these DSM portfolios moving forward?
One of the roles that we have tried to play is the catalyst in what's next with customers. It used to just be technologies that we're pushing out into the field, and then there was a realization that there was a human behind this and conservation effects could actually be a DSM program. So we started with kind of the first utility-oriented conference on behavior change, and then all of a sudden we saw a great expansion of behavior programs.
eSource was the first company that sponsored a social media event conference just for the utility industry. And we had this really cute way of promoting that. We had created this video showing sort of secretly an employee tweeting and doing social media, in a closet, because it was frowned upon at the time for employees to be doing that. This is just another example where eSource pushed the envelope and moved utilities into an area they may have been uncomfortable with, but really led the way to what was was really important for the industry and for them to understand.
Ultimately, what gets me up in the morning is the fact that if we succeed at our jobs, we're going to make the world a much better place, and that's just not a trivial thing when you're talking about the energy industry.
It's amazing how close Amory's projections actually were after all these years. And I believe that eSource played a really important role in making this happen by helping the market understand efficiency and helping to drive more energy efficiency in the market through our utility partners.
The really important part of this business is between the ears of every customer you serve or want to serve. And it's very exciting to me that eSource uniquely gets into that depth.
A service like eSource that goes round the bend, looks into the future and comes back to tell you what that future is going to be for you is more valuable today than it ever has been.
Today, we're celebrating what we've achieved with our utility partners over these decades. And tomorrow, it's time to get back to work and move the ball farther down the field.
We were blessed to be able to find the kind of talent, the kind of breadth of intellectual capacity that few startups have access to. And it clearly is why 30 years later, eSource is still here.
30 years is a pretty remarkable horizon to be looking back across. I'm full of hope and expectation for eSource's next decades.
To our partners at eSource, happy 30th birthday, and many more to come in carrying out our common mission.